Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Intro to Criminal Justice. We are in Chapter 5, Police Organization, Operation, and the Law. In this chapter, we ask about what we expect of the police, how the police are organized, what the police do, and the rules the police follow. Pay very close attention to the police and justifiable homicide. That's on page 143. The Fourth Amendment, that's on page 146. Terry v. Ohio, 1968, that's on page 150. Florida v. Bosnick, 1991, that's page 153. An interesting question presented here. What constrains the power of the police?
Gloucester has an opiates problem, and in March 2015 we had a series of overdoses that really affected the community, and we need to do something to change it. Arresting people wasn't the answer, obviously, so we needed to change up our tactics, and we decided that if somebody came to the police department and asked for help, that we would help them.
PARI is a law enforcement-based access to treatment, no shame, no blame, no stigma for anyone with the disease of addiction. They can simply come into a police department or A police department will go to the home of a user who may be recently overdosed and offer treatment versus jail. And PARI is really the beginning of the rest of people's lives for hopefully long-term recovery.
They gave me all the resources that I needed. They said any time of day or night, Lindsay, you need anything, you call us. I had their phone numbers. They introduced me to the PARI program. They understood where I was coming from. They understood what I've been through. They didn't judge me. And that worked out for me because I've been 3 years clean and it's been great.
After our first year, the New England Journal of Medicine reported out that people who come to the Gloucester Police Department are placed into treatment same day 95% of the time versus the emergency room that was placing people at 54%. Think about that. Police officers, compassionate law enforcement, are placing people into treatment at 2 times the rate as the healthcare system itself.
First and foremost, police officers are here to help. That's why most police officers get into the profession in the first place. They want to have a positive impact on their community and on individual lives.
Since June of 2015, we've placed in over 630 people.
It's 1 and 1 equals 1,000 when you bring law enforcement agencies together to share resources and information. And there's nothing that police can't do combined with the business community in changing public policy and saving lives. Gloucester, in particular, has been known as like a fishing village with a heroin problem, and now it's known as a fishing village with a heroin solution.
Bike Patrol is a community policing-oriented unit that services the downtown area.
You get to meet people from all over the world on Bike Patrol. We're able to patrol around one of the most historic cities in the nation. We get to ride around the Alamo. We get to ride around the Riverwalk.
Bike Patrol has many facets, and it is extremely unique. I mean, we cover everything from Probant down near Latuna all the way up to the Pearl. We even encompass part of the east side.
Our calls range from giving someone directions to possibly arresting a drunk or maybe handling illegal activities or family violence.
We've got approximately 68 to 70 bike certified officers. That includes supervisors. We have a detective unit.
When it rains, like any good policeman, trying to get wet. It's a little harder on a bike, but we try to stay out of the elements, like if it's raining real hard, but if a call comes out, I mean, you have to do your job.
That's a very common question. People always ask us, how do we transport people to jail when we're on bicycles? And we actually have a police wagon, a SAPD wagon. It's just a big van. And wherever you are, you get on the radio and you let the wagon driver know where you're at.
I love being on bike patrol because of the freedom. The freedom to go around the whole city and be available to people.
Being on bike patrol means a lot to me. What other unit on this department can you ride around and be in this nice weather?
The thing I like most about bike patrol is you can get into just about anything. Car burglaries, you can find suspects really quick because we can zip around downtown really quick.
In the academy, we would always ask each other, well, where do you want to go? What unit do you see yourself going on? And I always said from day one, I wanted to go to bike patrol. And here I am, and I don't regret it at all. I love it. I love bike patrol. The
camaraderie and the bike patrol unit is very close because we have to work very close as a team.
Everybody on the unit gets to know each other. It's like family.
We want everybody that comes downtown to have a great time. We want them to remember their visit to San Antonio for having a good time, experiencing our city.
If anybody is traveling downtown San Antonio and you see one of the bike patrol officers, I say come and talk to us. We are really friendly.
Police in New York City say there are no credible threats against tonight's New Year's celebration. Just the same, there is a massive security presence in Times Square. Mola Lenghi on what the NYPD is doing a bit differently this year.
The clock is ticking toward midnight at one of the biggest New Year's Eve parties on the planet. 1.5 million people are expected to pack Times Square to see the ball drop, and they've been showing up since sunrise. Chad Cruikshank got here around 5:40 a.m.
I want to get a really good spot for the ball drop and the concert and everything, the whole experience.
Perhaps only the NYPD has been planning longer for the party.
We call it our Super Bowl. So this is it. This is the big show. This is what we wait for all year long. We look at the whole world. We look at what's evolving, what has happened, what do we need to do to be safer and better.
NYPD's counterterrorism chief, Martin Matarazzo, says it's all hands on deck. Thousands of police officers, both in plain clothes and uniform, securing Times Square from the ground and in the air with drones and helicopters. There's a multi-layered screening process at all 12 entrances, and there are radiation detection, heavy weapons, and bomb squad response teams.
It's going to be the safest place on earth.
Security preparations extend to celebrations around the country, from the Navy Pier in Chicago to LA for the annual Rose Bowl parade on New Year's Day, making safety the first thing on their mind, so it can be the last thing on yours.
Well, the FBI tells CBS News there are no credible threats that they're aware of. As mentioned, security preps are a year-long process, and so the NYPD will begin planning for next year's New Year's celebration here in Times Square. As soon as the ball drops tonight, right behind us here at the Marriott Marquis Major.
Well, Lenghi, thank you so much.
Since the early years of the American judicial system, many cases have changed and defined laws. Some change how case laws are applied and interpreted. Others change how law enforcement trains, acts, and performs. Marbury v. Madison established the concept of judicial review, and Miranda v. Arizona established how officers handle Miranda rights during an arrest. Terry v. Ohio was one of those memorable cases in the history of the United States. It's not memorable for any crazy courtroom drama or even a huge scandal. It's famous because of the effect it had on law enforcement and how it still continues to affect law enforcement today. The memorable Chief Justice Warren presided over the landmark case. The case raised major questions that begged to be answered by the Supreme Court and would forever affect how law enforcement proceeded with searches of suspects. On October 31st, 1968, Cleveland Police Detective Martin McFadden observed Terry, the defendant, and two other men acting very suspiciously. McFadden had been assigned to downtown Cleveland in plain clothes and to be on the lookout for shoplifters and pickpockets. McFadden had tremendous experience as a police officer and had become very aware of the type of actions that came along with shoplifters and pickpockets. McFadden noticed Terry and another man repeatedly walking back and forth past the shop and stopping to look in the store window each time. After what McFadden said had gone on for 10 to 12 minutes, he decided it was his duty as an officer to make an inquisition about what the men were doing. He felt as though he had reason to believe they were casing the store and that they may be armed. He approached the defendant and two others and identified himself as an officer. After he failed to talk and communicate with the suspects, he spun Terry around and began to frisk him. While frisking him, McFadden found a .38 caliber revolver. McFadden searched the other two men that were with Terry and found a gun on Chilton, the second man, as well. McFadden called for a car and the two men were charged with carrying concealed weapons. The defense motioned to dismiss the guns as evidence because they felt as though they were not legally obtained. The defense tried to argue that the officer did not have probable cause to search the suspect. The court upheld the evidence and ruled the search and frisk was legal. The court also ruled the frisk was necessary for the officer to perform his job and duty. Therefore, the evidence was admissible. After this determination, the two defendants waived a jury trial and pled not guilty. The court adjudged them guilty, and the Ohio Court of Appeals and Supreme Court upheld the ruling, saying that the frisk was not unconstitutional. The case established that as long as the officer could give a legitimate reason or objective for frisking, as well as establish that the suspects were acting in a suspicious manner, then the officer may stop and frisk without consent in order to look for a specific object, in this case, a gun. Terry v. Ohio was a landmark case because it was one of the first cases to show any issue in regards to the Fourth Amendment. The Supreme Court gave their interpretation of the Constitution, and it was law. Now a frisk, or a Terry stop, is common. It allows officers to correctly perform their job as well as keep themselves and those around them safe. Not only does it allow police officers to do their job, but it sets guidelines that protect citizens as well. It sets what criteria must be met for an officer to stop and frisk. Thanks to Terry v. Ohio, officers cannot just walk up and frisk a suspect. The officer must have observed suspicious criminal activity and may only search lightly for weapons during the frisk. Terry v. Ohio changed the way in which officers perform their jobs forever. The case in 1968 established that officers can no longer search a suspect for no reason at all and use whatever they find. It protects citizens and establishes that there must be a reason. It also helps define what evidence may be deemed admissible or inadmissible. While it may have seemed like a small deal back then, it changed the way law enforcement officers are taught, trained, and how they execute their jobs forever. It interpreted the law, deemed what was constitutional, and how to protect citizens' rights. Without Terry v. Ohio, the issue may have never been addressed, or it may have been addressed in a much more harsh manner. Thanks to Terry v. Ohio, law enforcement officers now know how to proceed with suspicious suspects. It gave them a guideline that will continue to help them protect themselves and the public for years to come.